Legos, hot cocoa, and coloring books for college students? I'm Brad Polumbo, and we're going to break down the crazy campus coddling that's going down for Election Day and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics and across the internet, all from an independent perspective. First, happy Election Day. I'm filming this midday Tuesday, so it'll be way too early to have any results or discuss any of that by the time this comes out. But we'll talk about a couple election-related stories and some adjacent internet drama and so much more on today's show. First, though, we've got to check in on Georgetown, because the way that this prestigious university is treating its college students on Election Day is absolutely pathetic. The Georgetown School of Public Policy is offering students a self-care suite to help them cope and de-stress after the election, and it is one of the most pitiful things I've ever seen. We've got reporting here from the Free Press's Francesca Block, Legos, cocoa, and coloring books for Georgetown students. At the McCourt School of Public Policy, officials are offering mindfulness options to cope with the election. The only thing missing is a blankie. She writes, on Wednesday, the day after the election, most of us are going to roll out of bed, have our breakfast, and get on with our day, no matter which presidential candidate wins. But students at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, where diplomats and policymakers are molded, have another option. They can play with Legos. Seriously. The story gets even more ridiculous when you look at the details of what they're offering and why. In an email to McCourt students, Jacqueline Clevenger, the school's director of student engagement, introduced the school's post-election self-care suite. In recognition of these stressful times, she wrote, all McCourt community members are welcome to gather in the third floor commons to take a much-needed break, joining us for mindfulness activities and snacks throughout the day. The actual agenda for the day is breathtaking. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., they're offering tea, cocoa, and self-care. From 11 to 12 p.m., there'll be a Legos station. From 12 to 1, healthy treats and healthy habits will be covered. And from 1 to 2, they'll do coloring and mindfulness exercises. Of course, from 2 to 3 p.m., they'll be offering milk and cookies. 4 to 5 p.m., more Legos and coloring, and 5 to 6 p.m., snacks and self-guided meditation. Are you kidding me? Is this for real? Is this real life? A prestigious school for future diplomats is actually offering hot cocoa, Lego, and meditation because students are going to be stressed out over election results. Aren't these supposed to be adults? Grown-ass adults? Not toddlers in daycare? And as Francesca reports, Georgetown is not the only college doing this. At Missouri State University, the Counseling Center has set up a post-election self-care, no phone zone space with calm jars, coloring pages, and sensory fidgets. And just last week, the New York Times reported that Fieldston, the elite New York City private school, was making attendance the day after Election Day optional for students who, quote, feel too emotionally distressed. They've also eliminated all homework requirements that day and are offering psychologists for Election Day support. Give me a break. This is ridiculous and laughable. And guys, these are just a couple examples, but I can promise you colleges across the country are pulling this crap and coddling their students like they're infants because, oh no, what if Trump gets elected? Or what, the fate of democracy, and we could be in the Handmaid's Tale, and all this ridiculous nonsense that's just hysterical and has no basis in reality, and is treating them like toddlers with everything but the blankie, like Francesca said. And I think it's disgraceful because colleges are supposed to be preparing young adults for the real world, not coddling them like they're infants or toddlers. I mean, you're not going to have any of these things in the real world when you have to have a job and pay bills and deal with really tough crap. So the idea that college campuses should treat young adults like children is just totally counterintuitive and self-sabotaging, if you ask me. It's also patronizing and offensive to the many students who actually are adults and grown and don't need to be coddled, and it wastes their time and wastes their resources in some cases. I mean, I'll never forget, I was in college in 2016 when Trump was elected, and yes, they had a cry-in on campus. They had all sorts of ridiculous nonsense like this, but also the whole campus basically ground to a halt for several days, and there were protests. And then I went to one of my political science classes, and the professor just didn't teach. Instead, he just opened the floor for everyone to talk about their feelings. And I was like, excuse me, if I do the math, I'm paying like $300 or something for this hour. How about you do your job and can teach us political theory? We were supposed to be reading the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, and instead, this professor decided to waste our time and open the floor for Becky to cry about her fifis. I found it so ridiculous and offensive at the time that they would waste our time like that they would treat us like children, but so many of my peers seemed to not really get how that was weird or abnormal, or even relish it and go all in on it and act like they had been traumatized or something. All of which is actually pretty insulting to people who've actually dealt with trauma. The idea that some abstract election that's not really going to directly impact your life in most cases, most of these affluent white people from Massachusetts, nothing was going to really affect them. The idea that they'd be reduced to tears and be melting into puddles over it not going their way always struck me as so absurd and ridiculous when there are so many people facing such greater problems in their day-to-day that exhibit such resilience and strength, and yet you have these people just behaving laughably like this. At some point, these college campuses have to start losing their prestige. I mean, a supposedly elite school of public policy that, like Francesca said, is training the next generation of diplomats and politicians is also throwing them coloring books and Legos and tea time and hot cocoa to deal with their hurt fifis or their stress from election day. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, that's just a joke. And Georgetown is this big, fancy, expensive school with this great reputation, but how much can they do this kind of thing? How much can these elite schools get away with before that reputation starts to take a hit? Before people stop burying themselves in debt to go to colleges that have become an absolute joke? I think we need a changing of the attitude that we have towards college, which really isn't right for everybody, which not everybody should be going or should feel pressured to do. We need more alternatives, and we need to get rid of degree requirements when they're not really necessary so that these institutions can stop cashing in and enriching themselves off of prestige and reputation that they've long since outlived. I just find this whole thing and this whole story so absurd. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I do take the time to read the comments, and I'm always curious what you guys have to say. I pick a few to respond to in every episode as well. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show.